So today we stand on the doorstep of Hanukkah, the festival of dedication or the festival of lights. Before we kindle the first light tomorrow night, the Torah itself leads us into the heart of what dedication truly means. Many believe Hanukkah is a late rabbinic invention, something added after the Bible. But the truth is far deeper, far older, and far more beautiful. Also, the Maccabees, we have to understand, did not invent the word Hanukkah or dedication. Adonai himself established it in the Torah. I want us to understand today that Hanukkah is not merely a post-biblical story. Hanukkah is a biblical rhythm, a cycle of dedication that began long before the Maccabees ever lifted a sword. Today, I want us to follow that story from the tabernacle, which is called the Mishkan, to the temple, to the Maccabees, and finally to Yeshua, who celebrated Hanukkah and taught in the temple. To understand Hanukkah's true roots, we must go back in time, but not to 2nd century BCE, but to the Torah itself. We find ourselves in Numbers chapter 7. The Torah describes the dedication of the altar immediately after the tabernacle was completed. The text is unusually long, 89 verses, which is the longest single chapter in the Torah. So we're not going to read it in all for obvious reasons, but we are going to see key verses from chapter 7, starting with the opening verses in verses 1 through 3. It reads, "When Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its implements, the altar and all its utensils, and he anointed and consecrated them. Then the princes of Israel, heads of their ancestral homes, there were tribal princes in charge of those who were numbered, gave offerings. They brought as their gift before Adonai 6 covered carts, 12 oxen. A cart came from every 2 princes, and an ox from each one of them. They presented them before the tabernacle." This is read in the TLV version. So after Moses finished assembling and consecrating the tabernacle, the princes, the representatives of the tribes, join in the ceremonies of dedication by bringing their offerings. This consists of a pair of leaders. Each pair contributed 1 wagon and 2 oxen. They brought these offerings, or in Hebrew, korbanot, to the area in front of the tabernacle. Each of their offering was their korban, which the word offering doesn't do the word any justice, because the word korban means drawing nearer to the God, or to come close to God. So these offerings were their way of drawing near to God at the area before the tabernacle, which in Hebrew is Mishkan, which means to dwell in close proximity to something or to someone. This tabernacle was the same place where God was drawing near to his people. Why is this important? Because this is the first Hanukkah experience, the model of dedication in the same chapter. In verses 10 through 11, it reads, "When the altar was anointed, the princes brought their dedication, Chanukot offering, and presented them before Adonai. For Adonai had said to Moses, each day of the princes is to bring his offering for the altar's dedication. In Hebrew, Chanukot HaMizbeach. So for 12 days, God instructs Moses to schedule each tribe leader's korban on separate days for 12 days, 1 day for each tribe. The commentators, they ask, why does the Torah repeat the offerings of the tribal leaders 12 times, word for word? Because each leader brought his gift with a full heart. And Adonai cherished each offering individually. You have 12 tribes, 12 tribe leaders, and 1 unified dedication. This is the first Hanukkah. Notice the word used in the Torah for dedication. It is Chanukat, which in Hebrew, for the noun, is Hanukkah, dedication or consecration. Hanukkah denotes the formal dedication or inauguration of something set apart for the service of God. The word embraces the ideas of consecration, a joyful celebration, and covenant reaffirmation. The root word for Hanukkah is Chanak. This literally means to train, to dedicate, and to inaugurate. We see examples of this word in Deuteronomy 20, verse 5. Then the officials shall address the troops as follows. Is there anyone who has built a new house but has not dedicated it or chanaked it? Let him go back to his house before he dies, or another one will dedicate it. Or the most famous one, Proverbs 22, verse 6. Some translation says train or dedicate or bring up, but the word is chanak, inaugurate a lad in the way that he ought to go. He will not swerve from it, even in old age. This is the TLV version again. And also one more example, Genesis 14, verse 14. When Abram heard that Lot was taken captive, he rallied his Hanakmen, his trained or dedicated or inaugurated men. So this means that Hanukkah really means the process of initiating something into holy purpose or service. Hanukkah and Chanukat share the same Hebrew word for dedication and is the same word that the Maccabees revived centuries later. We must understand that the tabernacle was not a random tent in the middle of the desert. It was designed with homeocentric circles of holiness, a movement inward toward the divine presence of God. The design was this. You first have the courtyard. This is where the Israelites approached. Then you have the holy place. This is where service and supplication took place with the menorah and the table of showbread and the incense altar. And then finally, you have the Holy of Holies. This is where the divine presence dwelled. The tabernacle was a moving Sinai, if you will. Because just as the Israelites once drew near to God on that mountain, so now they draw near to God in the tabernacle. This is why the word for offering is korban, from the root word karav, for to draw near. The korban offering is a mechanism for coming closer to God. This was not pagan appeasement. The offerings were acts of approach, acts of a relationship, acts of intimacy with the creator and sustainer of the universe, with God, who made his home at the center of his people. This is why the leaders, the princes of the tribes, in Numbers chapter 7, verse 76 through 77, offered identical offerings for the altar. Each prince brought silver bowls, silver basins, golden ladles, meal offerings, sin offerings, peace or fellowship offerings. Each one the same, even the animals. This is not because consistency is holy, but because unity is holy. But these are far more than physical items. They offer representation. Each leader stands not for himself, but as the heart of an entire tribe. Because according to God, leadership in Israel at this early stage of its development, it was never about individuality. It was about carrying the people toward God. When the tabernacle was dedicated, the leadership became living bridges between heaven and earth. The leaders become living conduits of dedication, responsibility, and relationship. Why is this important to know? Because we humans are pulled towards holiness. Because holiness has gravity, meaning, and truth. We humans were created in the image and the likeness of God, which means naturally we are drawn towards light, order, beauty, meaning, presence of time, and presence of drawing near. The tabernacle embodied all five. This is why the human heart resonates with Hanukkah. It is a festive time when light breaks into the darkness on the Hanukkah menorah and something inside us wakes up. Also, Hanukkah, for many, it is a time for rekindling of the temple's inner logic. The irresistible is pulled toward the divine presence. This is the Torah's original meaning for Chanukat. Dedication is the opening invitation, the opening movement of drawing close. Now, centuries later, King Solomon, he completed the first temple. And how and when do you think he dedicated it? His dedication was not in Kislev or during the wintertime, but in the month of Tishrei, during the festival of Sukkot. How do we know this? The Bible doesn't tell us plainly, but it hints to it. We're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 8, starting in verse 1. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the ancestral chieftains of the children of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring the ark of the covenant of Adonai up from the city of David, which is Zion. All the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim, which is the 7th month. First, did you notice the pattern? An assembly of leaders at the temple, Israel's representatives in front of the divine presence. And now I know what you might be thinking. Chris, I don't see Sukkot or Tishrei here. It says the 7th month of Ethanim. You're right. But here is an explanation why it is in Tishrei on the modern Hebrew calendar, and it is the festival of Sukkot. 1 Kings chapter 8, but we're going to go all the way down to verse 65. So Solomon and all Israel with him celebrated the festival at that time. A great congregation from the entrance of the Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt before Adonai Eloheinu. 7 days, and then 7 days more, 14 days in all. On the 8th day, he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went to their tents joyful and glad of heart over all the goodness that Adonai had shown to his servant David and to his people Israel. Question. During the 7th month on the modern Hebrew calendar, what do we celebrate for 7 days? Sukkot. Also, look at 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 2 through 3. The priest could not even enter into the house of Adonai because the glory of Adonai filled the house of Adonai. When all the children of Israel saw the fire come down in the glory of Adonai above the house, they bowed down on the pavement with their faces to the ground, prostrated themselves and praising Adonai, for he is good and his mercy endures forever. Now going to same chapter, going to verse 8, at that time, Solomon observed the feast for 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great assembly from Lebo Hamath to the brook of Egypt. On the 8th day, they held a solemn assembly, for they had celebrated the dedication of what? Of the altar, Chanukat HaMizbeach, for 7 days, and the feast of Sukkot for 7 days. For those who don't know, Sukkot is celebrated for 7 days. And the 8th day, it is called Shemini Atzeret, or literally the 8th day of assembly. Also, Sukkot was so popular that during this time period, and even in 1st century, just calling Sukkot the feast or the festival was enough information for everyone to know what festival you were talking about. Interestingly, our pattern continues. But now we have a length of days. At Sukkot, you have a celebration for 7 plus 1 days. Also here at Solomon's temple, there was fire of God's presence, similar to the tabernacle's experience. We also have a holy assembly of leaders offering sacrifices for their people, and the dedication, no other than the altar. Sukkot also celebrates God's dwelling with Israel, God's provision. It also celebrates light and joy and the ingathering of the nations. And so, the tabernacle was dedicated in the season that represents God tabernacling with humanity. So the DNA of Hanukkah is established. A holy space that is desecrated The first time is in the golden calf at Mount Sinai. Then you have a holy space that is rebuilt and unused. This is the tabernacle, altar, and temple. And then Israel draws near. The leaders step up or step forward. Offerings are made. Light returns. Fire comes down from heaven. God dwells among his people. This is the divine pattern of Hanukkah. If there were to sing or recite a psalm, which one do you think they would use? Psalm 60. You're right. Psalm 60, verse 1. It says, a psalm of David, a song for the dedication of the house. Chanukhat Habayit. This psalm was written just for this moment when the temple would be dedicated. Therefore, Solomon's dedication was the second great Hanukkah. Now, the story moves forward. After centuries of spiritual erosion, foreign oppression, and eternal assimilation, the temple was desecrated by Antiochus IV. There was altars to Zeus in the sanctuary of God, or this is the temple. Swine, yes, pigs were sacrificed on the altar of God, and Torah scrolls were burned. The History Channel reports this moment in time, and I quote, around 200 BC, Judea, also known as the land of Israel, came under the control of Antiochus III, the Seleucid king of Syria, who allowed the Jews who lived there to continue practicing their religion. His son, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, proved less compassionate. Ancient sources recount that he outlawed the Jewish religion and ordered the Jews to worship Greek gods. In 168 BCE, his soldiers descended upon Jerusalem, massacring thousands of people, desecrating the city's holy second temple by erecting an altar to Zeus and sacrificing pigs within its sacred walls, end quote. This would later be described by the rabbis when darkness increased in Israel. But God raised up a family of leaders, priestly warriors called the Maccabees. They were the princes of Israel for their generation. Not kings, not politicians, but leaders who restored holiness to the center of Jewish life. When the Maccabees restored the altar, they did not create a new holiday. They restored an ancient pattern of Chanukhat HaMizbeach, the dedication of the altar ceremony found in Numbers chapter 7. The book of Maccabees tells us what and how they did it. We're going to go to 2 Maccabees chapter 10, and we're going to bounce around between verses 1 through 8. But the Spirit of the Lord made Judah Maccabee and his men succeed, and they captured the city and the temple. They offered their sacrifice to the Lord at the end of 2 years. They offered incense and arranged the lamps. They placed the showbread on the table of the Lord. And at the end of all these, they fell on their faces and they pleaded to the Lord. And from the Lord it was this, to purge the house on the same day that the nations defiled it. And it was the 25th day of the month of Kislev, and they celebrated a festival to the Lord for 8 days, like the days of the festival of Sukkot. And they remembered the previous days when they celebrated the festival of Sukkot in the mountains and in the caves, and they went out in the desolation of the wilderness like wild beasts. They took willows of the brook and branches of palm trees, so lulav, and they sang a song of praise and thanksgiving to the Lord, who gave them courage and salvation to purify the temple of his holiness. In other words, you can say Hanukkah is a missed Sukkot or a delayed Sukkot. The Hanukkah celebration has 8 days of celebration, which was literally modeled after this festival of Sukkot. So you can say that this is truly a second Sukkot that was celebrated in the winter because Sukkot had been stolen by war. So these elements echo the spiritual themes. Holiness reclaimed, we call this purification. Boundaries renewed, restoration. Light returning after oppression, illumination, and at the end, always thanksgiving and praise. Also, in other rabbinic teachings, they link Solomon's dedication to Hanukkah as a prophetic foreshadowing. Just as Solomon had dedicated the temple with glory and joy, so too later generations would rededicate it with the menorah light and song. So it is clear that Hanukkah is not only about military victory or oil. It is a continuation of the same theme of God's dwelling place being restored and filled with his light. This explains why Hanukkah is 8 days, why we celebrate it with lights, since Sukkot in the temple was called the Festival of Lights. Let me explain. Certain sources explain that the light from the golden lampstands used in the temple courtyard, there was about 5 of them, and they stood 70 feet tall. When they were lit, they were so bright that there was not a courtyard in Jerusalem that was not illuminated from the light of the place of the drawing of the water. This is why Sukkot is called the Festival of Light. Also, this explains why the temple is central to the festival of Hanukkah, why the holiday is called Hanukkah, dedication, just like Numbers chapter 7 and 1 Kings chapter 8. So we can see that this holiday is not a later rabbinic invention. It is a restoration of biblical dedication that is biblically patterned, temple-rooted, Sukkot-linked, Torah-shaped, and the continuation of an ancient rhythm of dedication. The Torah gave us the blueprint. The Maccabees acted on it. Centuries later, the Messiah Yeshua himself comes to Jerusalem, and where do you think we find him? John chapter 10, verse 22. Now it was the feast of dedication, Hanukkah, right here in Jerusalem. It was in the wintertime, and Yeshua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. This is key. Yeshua honored Hanukkah. He was in the temple in Solomon's porch at the very site connected to the first temple's dedication. Also, Yeshua proclaimed in John 8:12, I am the light of the world. John 1, 4 through 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. On Hanukkah, we proclaim Nes Gadol Haya Sham. A great miracle happened there. But the greatest miracle is not oil, it's light. Just as the menorah was rekindled in the temple, Yeshua rekindles the light of revelation in the world. Just as the altar was dedicated, Yeshua rededicates the heart of his disciples. Just as Hanukkah restores the temple, Yeshua restores the living temple within us. And the people asked Yeshua in the next verse, John 10:24. Then the Judean leaders surrounded him, saying, how long will you hold us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us outright. Are you starting to see the pattern here? So why would the Judean leaders be asking this question on Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah always contained a messianic undertone. You have the temple, you have the light, you have purity, liberation. What comes next? The coming Redeemer. And Yeshua answers these Judean leaders, telling them in John chapter 10, verse 25, Yeshua answered them and said, I told you, but you don't believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify concerning me. But you don't believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life. They will never perish and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. Yeshua's answer invoked divine sonship, shepherd imagery, eternal life, divine unity, the security of his flock, and all these themes of renewal and dedication, which is appropriate for this season. This is not accidental or incidental. Yeshua is literally standing in the temple during Hanukkah, teaching about his identity, his unity with the Father, his role as the Good Shepherd, his sheep hearing his voice, eternal security, and divine unity. Yeshua steps into the festival of rededication and reveals the nature of his relationship with the Father. Why? Because dedication leads to revelation. Just like the tabernacle's dedication revealed the glory of God, just like Solomon's dedication revealed the cloud of fire, the Maccabees' dedication revealed light returning after oppression, and Hanukkah becomes a moment where Yeshua reveals divine truth. Hanukkah, at its core, always pointed toward a deeper dedication, the dedication of the human heart as God's dwelling place. Dedication appears repeatedly. You have Moses' tabernacle, Solomon's first temple, the post-exiled Jews and their second temple altar and foundation and the walls. This is found in Ezra and Nehemiah. Then you have Maccabees, and then Herod rebuilt the second temple. This is the biblical symphony of renewal and dedication. Then the fifth movement during Herod's temple, Yeshua comes to fulfill this beautiful musical pattern. But his moment is messianic. And we have to go to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 20. Look what it says. It says, he dedicated or inaugurated Hanukkah, Hanak, a new and living way for us through the curtain, that is his flesh. We have a high priest over God's household. The same Greek word for dedicated or inaugurated is the same word for Hanukkah, the dedication, the same word that we found in John chapter 10, verse 22. Yeshua is the final dedication, the final restoration of humanity as God's living sanctuary. This marks the final beginning of a covenantal relationship or access that did not exist before. It's two New Testament occurrences stand in the book of Hebrews where the writer contrasts the inauguration of the Mosaic covenant with the superior dedication accomplished by Yeshua, our Messiah. For this to be true for us as his disciples today, first, God desires the human heart. 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 19. Now set your hearts and souls to seek after Adonai your God. Rise up and build the sanctuary of Adonai Elohim so that you can bring the ark of the covenant of Adonai and the holy vessels of God into the house built for the name of Adonai. Also James chapter 4, verse 8. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. These verses are encouraging us on a spiritual level. We are to prepare ourselves and dedicate our hearts for the Hanukkah that Yeshua provided for us. James is teaching us that if we korban to God, if we draw near to God, then God will korban with us, or God will draw near in return. This is going back to Numbers chapter 7, but these verses takes us to a deeper level. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 through 17. Don't you know that you are God's temple? That the Spirit of God dwells in you or among you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. The tabernacle was first, the temple was second, but now, in the Messiah, we are also the sanctuary, the house of the Lord. Hanukkah invites us to rededicate the altar within us. That is our heart. Just as the Israelites did in the wilderness, and as the Maccabees did in Jerusalem, Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 5 tells us, Adonai said to me, Son of man, set your heart, behold, with your eyes, hear with your ears, all that I say to you concerning all the ordinances of Adonai's house and all its laws. Set your heart to the entrance of the house with all exits of the sanctuary. Are we setting our hearts to the entrance of the house of the Lord? Those are our ears, our eyes, our nose, our mouth. Are we concerned about what enters through those gateways of God's temple as you are? Nevertheless, the leadership of Israel in Numbers chapter 7 taught community how to draw near to God. The Maccabees restored holiness to a defiled world. They rededicated the altar with fire and light. Yeshua brought the light of heaven into the human heart, revealed divine truth during Hanukkah. And now we are called to do the same thing. So let me give you some Hanukkah questions we need to ask ourselves. Do my actions draw people near to God or push them away? If you answered push them away, then ask yourself again, where has my inner sanctuary grown dim? Another question, do I bring light into darkness or avoid the dark places? If you avoid those dark places, then ask yourself, where has secular culture left its mark? Then ask, do I restore holiness where it has been lost? If you are not sure, then ask, what needs cleansing, rebuilding, or renewing? Then finally ask, do I dedicate myself anew each day? And if you aren't sure, then ask, what altar in my life needs fresh dedication? Hanukkah is not about spinning dreidels, candy, fried food, or donuts. It is about spiritual ometzlav, spiritual courage, the courage to cleanse, the courage to rebuild, the courage to light one candle in overwhelming darkness and mockery. So how do we rededicate our hearts and lives? By 1, drawing near through prayer and repentance. 2, offering ourselves as a living sacrifice. 3, by letting Messiah's light shine in the hidden places. And 4, by becoming leaders like the princes in Numbers 7, who were vessels of representation, service, and humility. As I close this message, may we understand from the tabernacle to Solomon's temple, to the Maccabees, to Yeshua at the Feast of Dedication, to us today, living temples filled with his light, Hanukkah has always been a biblical rhythm of drawing near, of rebuilding holiness, of restoring light, and rededicating the heart. This is not a minor holiday then. Hanukkah is not a post-biblical celebration. It is not a cultural afterthought. It is the living continuation of dedication. Number 7, we have dedication of the temple and altar. Psalm 30, the dedication of the house of God. 1 Kings chapter 8, the dedication of the temple during Sukkot. 2 Maccabees chapter 10, the dedication of the altar at the second Sukkot. And John chapter 10, Yeshua teaching during the festival of dedication. It is a continuation of a biblical theology. When God's house is darkened, the people bring light. When God's presence seems far, the people draw near. When the world forgets holiness, the people rededicate. This is a call from God saying, dedicate yourself again to my light. It is a feast that proclaims God restores what has been defiled. God rekindles what has been burned low. God draws his people near to himself, and his light, the light of the Messiah, never goes out. The temple's light was not meant to stay in the temple, you see. It was meant to overflow into our homes. Hanukkah is our invitation, not only to light candles, but to become a candle. Not only to remember dedication, but to embody dedication. Not only to celebrate light, but to shine light. It is a call to rededicate our inner altar, reignite the inner flame, and rebuild the sanctuary within. May this Hanukkah awaken in us the same courage, the unity, and the devotion that filled Israel at every dedication of the house of God. And with that, chazak ve'amatz, be strong and be courageous, and Chag Urim Sameach.